You're listening to Fahey and Shivari on SportsTown Chicago.com.
All right, I have a feeling that right now we have Gabe Salgado on the line because I just saw the phone flashed. I've been talking to him off the air here, so let's go ahead and bring him in. I don't have the awesome Dr. Dre music, but
I can hang on.
No, we don't need to do it. Let's just talk. We got time here.
I insist.
So, all right. You know what that music means? It's time for Gabe Salgado, my freelance writer. Gabe, welcome to the show, buddy.
Well, I appreciate you guys going all out for me with the theme music.
No problem. I am a fan of Dr. Dre, Gabe, so there is no worry about that. For any Dr. Dre music, I'll be more than glad to play it. Not a problem.
Anything I can do for you, Gabe, I will do it. I will go the extra mile for you. Thank you for calling in, Gabe. I'm glad you got in this week because it's been a while. I was off for the last 2 weeks, and there's lots of stuff that you and I need to talk about. And I know that you've been following this Northwestern story, and you need to educate me on what exactly is going on with the Northwestern football team unionizing, because this is a big story. It's still in its infancy. I know at the end of the month there's going to be a vote on it to determine if it goes through, and then there would be, if there's the collective bargaining. But why don't you just walk us through where it's at right now and what's going to happen with this story?
Well, where it's at right now is that, the National Labor Relations Board, at least the Chicago office of that organization, they ruled that Northwestern could unionize, that they are employees of the university, considering that the work that they put in with both school and the sports, and the fact that the university makes, millions of dollars off of them. Based on their performances and everything. And, right now they voted that the team has the right to unionize. But what's going on now, again, this is just the beginning. The university is filing an appeal on April 9th to make their case heard that student athletes are just that, student athletes and nothing more, while the football team itself is going to vote on April 25th to decide whether or not they should unionize and should seek collective bargaining. So this is going to drag on for quite some time here. You're going to go through the appeals process. There's a good chance that this could end up in the court system, especially as Northwestern the university continues to fight this.
Based on what you're saying, Gabe, about the appeals process with Northwestern and, later on as the dates go on with the certain voting and all that, do you see this as of right now, from what it appears from what you told us, this sounds like this is going to be a long marathon that is going to go into the summer, I would assume?
More than likely, yeah. I mean, like I said, the appeals process, takes a lot longer than people realize. I know it seems like, they just do it, right then and there and it's done. But, there's a lot that needs to be done. Like whoever hears the appeal, they need to go through the evidence. They need to go through the facts. They need to evaluate everything. And then especially since, college athletes have never been paid, at least visibly anyway. And not that they're seeking pay, at least, the CAPA says they just want medical benefits and scholarship protections, but the whole point is that the university would have to dish out money regardless. But, again, with Northwestern stating their cause that, that the players, don't deserve, they get their scholarship, they get their other education, and there shouldn't be any more than that. And, Northwestern has the backing of both the Big Ten and the NCAA. So, with those two organizations behind them, this is definitely going to be a fight to the finish.
Is there a chance that this could go as far as the Supreme Court?
I think there's definitely a good chance, because you got to understand that first there's the National Labor Relations Board. They got to make their choice, and then based on that, this could very well end up in the court system, because if the NLRB rules in favor of Northwestern at the end of the day, the university is going to keep fighting. But if they rule in favor of the university, then the team, should they decide that they want to unionize, they're going to keep fighting. So it all depends on how far they're willing to go, and again, this could very well end up in the Supreme Court, depending on how long they want to push this.
Gabe, I want to get an idea of where you stand on this issue with the Northwestern athletes trying to unionize all this stuff. Are you for this or against this?
I'm for it. I understand that the NCAA has their rules in place, and they've been in place for quite some time. But when you take a look at factors at, how, for example, players, there have been players, not many, but there have been players who've lost scholarships due to injury. They can't continue their education. That's something that definitely needs to change. Definitely, more medical benefits, the university dishing out more money so the players, can, get their injuries taken care of and everything else. They're also seeking long-term care for players who get serious injuries while in college and can't continue their playing careers beyond college, which, now with concussions and everything else, that can happen. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. Paul and I talked about this, a month or two back when this issue first came up. And I think that eventually, college players should at least get a monthly stipend with all the work that they put in, providing that they pass their classes, they attend all their classes, they make all the practices, they do everything that's asked of them from an athletic standpoint. And I think this shouldn't just be for football. I think it should be for all sports. So I think that, when you consider the work that the players put in on top of their, academic schedules, which can be pretty hefty, I think they should get a little more than, what they're getting now. Granted, okay, they're getting their education paid for, but it's like, what else is left after they pay for their books and their tuition and everything else? So having a little something extra for the players just show that their hard work is being rewarded, I think is warranted at this point, especially when you consider all the money that these conferences are making, especially with the TV contracts and sponsorships and everything else. There's a lot of money being thrown around college athletics, and there's quite a few people who don't realize just how much is going into it. We're talking millions, if not billions, of dollars here.
I'm glad you brought up that it should be for all sports, because that's the biggest problem I have with it. Most people that have an opinion on this story say that, yeah, football and basketball draws so much money, they should be compensated for it. But I think that's unfair if you didn't compensate accordingly to the swimmers and all the other, all the other sports. I mean, I'm not going to list all of them here, but I was glad that you brought that up. But Gabe, we're running out of time here, and I know you wanted to talk about the Final Four, as we should, since it's coming up in a couple days here. They say that the coaches that have coached in the Final Four usually tend to have the best success. With that being said, it looks like that we're going to have a final that features Florida and Kentucky in all SEC final. Is that something that you think is probably going to happen, or do you think we're going to see an upset here with UConn or Wisconsin possibly sneaking in?
In the Final Four, anything could happen. But one thing that I can tell you is I don't see anybody stopping Florida. They're red hot. They're very good on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively, especially on the defensive side. If you saw how they smothered Dayton in the Elite Eight, they're a very efficient offensive team. They don't do anything flashy, but that's what makes them so great. They stick to the basics and the fundamentals of basketball. And, they've already beaten Kentucky twice this year, and I don't know if Wisconsin or UConn has enough talent to keep up with them. So I definitely don't see anybody stopping Florida as to who they'll play in the championship game. That remains to be seen, but right now my favorite to win it all is Florida.
Has Jimmy Buffett wrote you the check yet for the $1 billion perfect bracket?
I don't even think my bracket went that far. I mean, after the first round, my bracket was completely screwed up.
Okay.
Did you hear there was a guy locally that after the first weekend here had the last remaining perfect bracket? I think it was
he went through the Sweet 16 perfect.
I don't even think he made it that far. I think it was through Saturday he was perfect, and then
I thought
one of the
I heard
ones
Sweet
on
16.
Sunday.
I don't know.
Maybe you're right. But it was a guy from Buffalo Grove. Did you hear about that, Gabe? The last guy remaining in the Warren Buffett bracket was a local guy.
No, I didn't, but I did hear, I want to say it was after the second day of the tournament that Friday, or as a matter of fact, it was that night. I saw on Twitter that there was no perfect brackets remaining, so nobody was going to get that money. I mean, obviously $1 billion, that's a lot of money, and then I highly doubt that anybody could ever, have the perfect bracket. I don't think it's ever happened. I know it's never happened with me, and, I've filled out brackets every year since high school, so, I definitely think that, it would definitely take a miracle for that to happen. I think you have a better chance of winning the lottery than you do winning the bracket lottery.
I think you're right.
I should try that now.
I saw the odds and they've varied, and it's in the
it's like 9.4 quintillion is
I was
like 1 in
say,
9.4 quintillion is the chance of you having a perfect bracket.
Like a 30-digit number or something.
It's ridiculous. But
Gabe, with that, the perfect bracket, I guess kind of want your opinion on this. Do you think winning $1 billion would be advantageous? I mean, because they kind of say more money, more problems. I would feel like that this feels like a sports documentary in the making. Like the guy that wins the $1 billion is going to end up, having tax problems or just all sorts of, they say that with winning the lottery, there comes to be certain surrounding issues with maybe family members starting to get into drugs or just certain, the lifestyle kind of brings across certain debauchery or certain problems. I mean, I wanted your opinion on that.
Well, I believe that, more money brings more problems in the sense that, yes, you'll probably have family and friends, coming out of the woodwork looking for a handout. But I mean, as far as like, the lifestyle and, things of that nature. I mean, it all depends on how you spend your money. I mean, obviously, worst case scenario, you got so much money that you don't know what to do with that you end up doing things that you normally wouldn't do. But, I think, if you're disciplined and if you're, smart with your money, you can get away from that. As far as taxes go, I mean, obviously, that's an automatic. I mean, like I said, one of life's guarantees, death, taxes, and I forgot what the third thing is, but you guys see where I'm going with this. I mean, obviously.
Right.
Obviously, you'd have to report that as your income because $1 billion, that's a lot of money. You can't just hide $1 billion. So
unless you stuff it into your mattress.
I mean, so I definitely think that's something that'll come up. And I mean, as far as like the whole lifestyle thing, it all depends on like how you spend your money and how you invest it, and more importantly, how you stay disciplined and control yourself.
Before we let you go, Gabe, what are you working on next? What's the next story that you're kind of covering here? Because I know the college basketball season has died down. I know you cover some Bears football, but what can we expect to hear from you next?
Hopefully I can start getting into some baseball soon. One thing that I will do, my last round of college basketball stories, I'll go through, which local players I think have a chance of getting into the NBA or just pro ball in general. So I will put those out, sooner rather than later. So we'll definitely look out for those.
All right, sounds good. Same time next week?
Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks, Gabe.
Thank you, Gabe.
All right, thanks, guys.
Gabe Salgado. You can follow him at Twitter, at Gabe Salgado82. He's a freelance writer, and as you just heard, he covers it all, man. Final Four, Northwestern, he talks Bears football. He wants to get into some baseball, which he knows he can do that with me. We got to break things up here so that we can have Behind the Glass get in and do their show. Want to thank you guys for having us for the first ever Fahey and Shivari show. Ryan's going to be gone next Thursday, but I'll be here hopefully 10 to 2. If not, I'll definitely be here 12 to 2. But then the following week, we're back on our normal schedule at 10 to 2. Thanks for joining us, guys. This has been the Fahey and Shivari Show on SportsTown Chicago. Yeah, buddy. Later, guys.
You're listening to Fahey and Shivari on SportsTownChicago.com.
But that doesn't matter because right now on the line, you know what that music means. It's time for Gabe Salgado right here on the Fahey and Shivari Show. Gabe, welcome back in.
I couldn't forget the music.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going all right. Thanks for joining us. I read that story that you sent me about Yasiel Puig and made it about halfway through before I went to bed last night. So I know how the story ends. I mean, it must be a happy ending if he's playing for the Dodgers, but you're going to have to kind of walk us through what happened from Mexico to the United States. It's one of those things where this story is not really told too often about what a Cuban player has to do in order to make it to the United States. And I knew that defecting from Cuba is a very risky thing, but I didn't realize just how much was involved with smugglers taking him to Mexico and the negotiation between the guy in Miami that was going to pay for him and how the threatening to chop off his fingers and his arms if they don't get paid. So I just wanted your thoughts on that and how you stumbled across the article and maybe what you may have known or not known before you read that article.
I actually stumbled across that article when I was actually looking at some stuff on Yahoo, and they had a link to it, and I was curious, so I checked it out, and I read the story. And the part that you didn't get to was that even after Puig made it to the Dodgers and got his contract, those smugglers were still looking for their money. So they actually got a hold of Puig directly and threatened him and his family if they didn't pay up. But I guess they were able to get past that. But, the whole point of the story is that, it's just, it's just one of those things of how, here in this country we take our freedoms for granted. I mean, obviously, this country's not perfect, but at the same time, just imagine what he went through, living on pennies a week, just a few dollars a month to get by, and, just everything that he had to go through to get here to become a major league player, to create a better life for, him and his family. So it's just some things that we tend to take for granted, and, it's just, can't even begin to imagine what Yasiel Puig went through.
I found it ironic that there was that quote in there about Fidel Castro getting rid of the minor league system in Cuba once the revolution had occurred and saying that this is the end of slave baseball, now it's time for free baseball. But then you have Yasiel Puig playing as an amateur only making $17 a month.
Wow.
And just living very poor. Whereas meanwhile in the United States, minor league players don't make a lot of money, but they enough to live off of, and major league players, the minimum is, a six-figure salary. So I mean, it's just kind of ironic. I think that Fidel Castro and his communist system thinks that what he provides for Cuba is considered free baseball. But with Yasiel Puig, when you brought this story to my attention, I thought you were talking about how the other night he didn't. He hit a pop fly to right field and just stared at it. He stayed in the batter's box and just stared at it, and then once it was caught, walked directly to the dugout. And Puig, he's only been in the league for less than a year now and has already had a huge impact on the league. And last year it seemed like the story was the intensity that he plays the game, but now we're kind of seeing that he's a little bit aloof. This is a lot for a guy that's only 22 years old. What are your impressions of Yasiel Puig, and do you think that this is a guy that's going to be possibly getting into deeper trouble as he gets older here in the league?
I certainly hope not. I mean, he has a lot of talent. He's not afraid to take risks. He came through for the Dodgers last year when they had a lot of injuries. They basically went from worst to first in just a matter of a few months. And, you could only hope that, he can stay out of trouble. He's been arrested for reckless driving and some other minor stuff, but, hopefully he can, come to his senses and realize that, yes, America is a free country, but there still are laws that apply here. And, I think what it boiled down to for him was the fact that, he was happy to be here and he was happy to be in a place where he didn't have to worry about the things that he had to deal with in Cuba. So I think he probably kind of let that get to his head a little bit. But, Puig is definitely a talented player. And so far he's paid dividends on the money that the Dodgers have invested in him. So hopefully, he can continue to mature and he can continue to play at a consistent level. And then you also take a look at, that could have been something similar that Jose Abreu from the White Sox might have gone through. He's always talked about since he got here that, he's trying to get his mother out of Cuba and bring her here. And, he wanted to play Major League Baseball because he wanted to do something better for his mother and give a better life for her. So he's here. And obviously he got the big contract from the White Sox and he's another guy too that doesn't really like to necessarily talk about how he got here. So it's just really, it's just something that we all tend to take for granted, and sometimes we don't realize just what these guys have to go through to get here. So, if Puig went through all that, I can only imagine what Jose Abreu and even Alexi Ramirez had to go through.
You talk about, Gabe, with the maturity process of Yasiel Puig, because he's been in Major League Baseball for not even a year and a calendar year overall. There's been those incidents, Gabe, where he's shown up late to Dodger Stadium for games. Manager Don Mattingly will bench him because he's not being there in a professional manner, not only just for himself, but for the team as well. Is that something to really worry about going forward with his maturity? Because we're seeing him show up, late at practices before games. And is that something that could maybe hinder his future with the Dodgers if he keeps this up?
Definitely. I mean, I think any time that, you do something that's detrimental to the team and something that's, not helpful to the team and, takes away your production, I think that could jeopardize your situation regardless of what team you play for. I think that, Yasiel Puig, obviously he's got a lot of money that he's never had before. And, on top of that, he's young. He's still in his, earlier mid-20s, something around there. So, of course, that's if he didn't lie about his age, like, most Latin American players tend to do. But I think that, hopefully, he can realize whether that comes from his agent or whoever else is in his inner circle and tries to get him to understand that, this is the big time and that this is Major League Baseball and that you got to adhere to the rules and standards if you want to keep playing and if you want to keep, continue making the money that you've become accustomed to making since you got here. So, whether that's somebody just, getting in his face and saying, hey, time to cut the crap and, let's get down to business or whatever the case may be, like I said, he has a lot of talent, let's just hope he can, get, the maturity part and the mental aspect together so he doesn't lose out on that.
That's Gabe Salgado. He's joining us on the Illinois Center for Broadcasting hotline. He's also a freelance writer who you can follow on Twitter at Gabe Salgado82. Gabe, let's shift it over to Chicago baseball now, the local slant here. The White Sox, easily the first thing that jumps to mind is how they've normally been a team that was strong in pitching and weak on the offensive side of things, and that's completely flip-flopped now to where they're a powerful offensive team but weak in the bullpen department more so than starting pitching. What are your first impressions about the White Sox, and what surprised you the most this far into the season?
What surprised me most is, the improvement of their offense. They're getting runs, they're getting on base. They're not necessarily just swinging for the fences. They're just trying to get, station-to-station base running, and they're just doing whatever they can to get on base. And, it's turned into more runs for them than it did at this time last year. But the bullpen is a big concern. The bullpen really has, they've blown a lot of games. And you take a look at, the last few games, the bullpen's really been taxed because Ventura's having to use them so much. Last night, they had to put Lurie Garcia in there as a relief pitcher towards the end of the game because, he used so many pitchers over the last few days that he was trying to give somebody a break. And I think that the bullpen really needs to get it together. And I also think that they could probably get a little more out of their starters, too, so that way the bullpen doesn't have to be relied on so much because, as we both know, pitching is what's going to get you through the season. You could have a good offense all you want, but if your pitching doesn't have it together, it's only going to take you so far. So hopefully the White Sox can get it together with their bullpen, and hopefully they can, get things together for the sake of, this turnaround of their season. They're doing okay so far, but they could be better, and it all starts with pitching.
I want to get your thoughts, Gabe, on Jose Abreu through the first 14 games so far in the season. What goals do you have for Abreu going forward into this 2014 season?
If he continues to hit the way he's hitting, there could be a good chance that he just might make the All-Star team this year. He just has that much talent. He's got a lot of pop in the bat, and, he doesn't necessarily have to hit, 50 home runs like everybody's expecting him to. He could easily get 100 and something RBIs. He's been consistent. He's done well with runners in scoring position, and he's really brought new life into an offense that has struggled the last couple of years.
I want to kick it over to the Chicago Cubs now. A little bit of a rougher story than the White Sox are, and I think it's expected. But
chest pains.
What jumps out to you right now with the Cubs in terms of their weakest point and their strongest point now 2 weeks into the season?
Their weakest points. I just think it's a lot of fundamental stuff that they continue to get wrong. Obviously, the pitching is there. Sometimes it's there. Sometimes it's not. The offense occasionally will show flashes of brilliance. Other than that, it's pretty much the same story that it was last year. Really, it's just a lot of fundamental stuff to get wrong, whether it's mechanics at the plate, bad pitches on the mound, mistakes in the field. One of the few bright spots for the Cubs this year has been Emilio Bonifacio. He's pretty much played every day. He could play 6 positions. Every team should have a utility player that could play 3 or more positions because, that's always very valuable. A guy who can step in and you can plug in always anywhere is a great benefit to any baseball team, and the Cubs are getting that now. It's just unfortunately he can't do it all by himself. He can't play every position, and he can't bat 9 times throughout a game. So obviously, the Cubs got to get production from other players too. But it's nice to see that the Cubs have somebody that they can depend on, and it's just the rest of the teams really got to catch up.
You talked about it just a moment ago, Gabe, with how the Cubs have had some sparks of excellence with the batting. Well, yesterday in the day-night doubleheader, they did not score any runs in their doubleheader, losing to the Yankees in the first game 3-0, and in the nightcap it was 2-0 loss. It was the first time since 1962 the Cubs have had that happen. So I think it's safe to say, Gabe, and agree with me or not on this one, that this is just another 2014 year of depression for Cub fans.
It's definitely looking like that, and the thing you got to remember is that the Yankees have a decent pitching staff this year. Tanaka obviously proved that he's more than capable of handling a major league batting order, and he did that to the Cubs yesterday. So I think it was more or less the Cubs just had to deal with solid pitching, more than anything that it was at the plate. But that's just one game out of the overall picture where the Cubs, most of the time they struggle, and occasionally they'll put up a few runs and compete. So, but I think it's definitely looking that way. That's going to be another rough season. Obviously, the new prospects, Almora and Baez and Brian, all those other guys, can't get here fast enough. But obviously, it's a process. As much as we'd like to take everybody from single A and just throw them into the opening day lineup, unfortunately, the system doesn't work that way. So I think, the Cubs, just just fight through the season, see what pieces work and what pieces don't, and just go from there. And it could end up being that, the Cubs will have another fire sale come July 31st. So, we'll see how long that lasts, and, we'll see how long it takes for some of those prospects to start arriving. And, hopefully hopefully these guys are as good as everybody says they are. Hopefully it'll help this team turn around. If not, then, Lord only knows what happens from here.
Quick thoughts. I just want a yes or no here. Do you think Starlin Castro is going to be part of that fire sale this July 31st?
And that's tough to say because of the big contract that he has and the lack of production over the last couple years. Would anybody willing to take on that kind of contract unless the Cubs cough up a bunch of money for it like they did for Soriano? So, that's a tough one. Obviously, Castro, still going through some issues, whether it be at the plate or whether it be in the field. He's kind of regressed over the last couple of seasons. So that combined with the amount of money he's making, that's really going to be tough for the Cubs to move him.
All right, Gabe, I want to thank you for your thoughts. And
Thanks, Gabe.
Let's do this again next week.
All right, guys, thanks.
All right, that's Gabe Salgado. He is a freelance writer. You can follow him at Gabe Salgado82. That's GABESALGADO 82.
Another spelling lesson for you boys and girls.
We do a lot of spelling when it comes to...
We do a lot of spelling and just for men promos.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that tends to be the trend. Well, that's we got to wrap it up here.
Yep,
That's
Behind the Glass is next. This is the Fahey and Shivari Show here on SportsTown Chicago.
.com.